You don't deserve this more than I do. I'm taking what should have been mine. That's what my sister-in-law Vivian said, as she ripped the promotion letter right out of my hands in the break room at Meridian Tech Solutions. The letter that had my name on it. The letter that represented 3 years of 70-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and sacrificed weekends. The letter that finally acknowledged that Isabella Chen was worthy of the senior marketing director position I'd been doing without the title or pay for 8 months. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But what Vivian didn't know was that my husband wasn't just some quiet guy who worked from home, and what happened next would prove that sometimes the person you underestimate the most holds all the cards you never even knew were in play. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about a stolen letter. It's about what happens when someone who's been invisible for so long finally decides to step into the light. And trust me, when that light shines, it illuminates everything, including the people who thought they could keep you in the shadows forever. My name is Isabella Chen, and for the past 3 years, I've been the engine behind Meridian Tech Solutions' most successful marketing campaigns. While my colleagues took credit for my strategies in board meetings, I stayed late perfecting the analytics. While they networked at company happy hours, I was redesigning entire campaign frameworks that boosted our client retention by 43%. While they played office politics, I delivered results that spoke for themselves, or so I thought. The promotion letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I was the first one in the office, as usual, checking emails and reviewing the quarterly reports before the chaos of the day began. When I saw the official Meridian letterhead in my inbox, my heart nearly stopped. After 8 months of essentially doing the senior marketing director job, while my previous supervisor transitioned to new opportunities, which was corporate speak for got fired for incompetence, I had finally officially been recognized. The letter was everything I'd dreamed of, not just the title but a salary increase that would finally match my contributions, stock options, a corner office, but most importantly, recognition that I wasn't just the girl who fixed everyone else's mistakes. I was the strategist who had been driving our department's success all along. I printed the letter immediately. I wanted to hold it, to make it real. For 3 years I'd watched less qualified colleagues leapfrog over me because they were louder, more connected, or simply better at taking credit for collaborative work. This letter was proof that excellence eventually gets noticed, even when it comes wrapped in quiet competence, rather than flashy presentations. I was reading it for the 3rd time, savoring every word, when Vivian walked into the break room. Vivian Holloway Chen. Yes, she hyphenated after marrying my husband's brother Marcus, had been at Meridian for exactly 14 months. She was hired as a marketing associate, 2 levels below where I was operating. But she had something I apparently lacked, the ability to make herself the center of every conversation. Within her first week, she was volunteering for high-visibility projects. Within her first month, she was somehow copying me on emails to executives that had nothing to do with her role. Within 6 months, she was presenting my research to the board while I sat in the back, watching her butcher the strategic nuances I'd spent weeks developing. But she was family. Marcus constantly reminded everyone of that. We need to support Vivian, he'd say during family dinners. She's working so hard to prove herself. What he didn't see, what none of them seemed to see, was that Vivian wasn't working hard to prove herself. She was working hard to prove that I was expendable. That Tuesday morning in the break room, I was still glowing from my promotion letter when Vivian walked in. She took one look at the official Meridian letterhead in my hands, and her expression shifted from casual friendliness to something I'd never seen before. Pure, undisguised envy. "What's that?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "My promotion letter," I said, unable to keep the pride out of my voice. "I got the senior marketing director position." For a moment, neither of us spoke. I watched something dark flicker across her face, and then she did something I never could have anticipated. She reached across the small break room table and grabbed the letter right out of my hands. "Let me see that," she said, but she wasn't asking. Before I could react, she was reading my private correspondence, her eyes scanning every line of my achievement. "You don't deserve this more than I do," she said quietly, and there was something in her voice that made my blood run cold. "I've been working just as hard. I have the same degree. I have better presentation skills. I should have been considered for this position." "Vivian, that's my letter," I said, reaching for it. "Please give it back." But instead of handing it back, she did something that changed everything. She folded the letter in half, then in half again, and slipped it into her purse. "I'm taking what should have been mine," she said, standing up. "You can explain to HR why you're so careless with important documents." I sat there in stunned silence as she walked out of the break room, my promotion letter disappearing with her. For a moment I couldn't process what had just happened. Had my sister-in-law really just stolen my promotion letter? Had she really just threatened to gaslight me about my own carelessness? But as the shock wore off, something else settled in, a clarity I'd never felt before. Because what Vivian didn't know was that while she saw me as the quiet, pushover sister-in-law who would never make waves, she had just messed with the wrong person. You see, my husband David isn't just some work-from-home guy who stays out of office politics. David Chen is the founder and CEO of Quantum Ventures, a venture capital firm that happens to own a controlling stake in Meridian Tech Solutions. A detail I'd never mentioned at work because I wanted my success to be my own. A detail that Vivian, in all her confidence and cruelty, had never bothered to discover. She thought she was stealing from someone powerless. What she had actually done was declare war on someone who was connected to the very person who could end her career with a single phone call. And as I sat in that empty break room, staring at the space where my promotion letter used to be, I realized that sometimes the quiet ones aren't quiet because they're weak. Sometimes they're quiet because they're strategic. And sometimes when someone pushes them too far, their silence becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. Vivian had just stolen more than my letter. She had stolen my last reason to protect her from the consequences of underestimating me. And what happened next would prove that in the game of corporate politics, it's not always the loudest player who wins. Sometimes it's the one who's been quietly building the most powerful connections all along. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I sat in that break room for exactly 3 minutes after Vivian walked out with my letter, staring at the empty space on the table where my future had been just moments before. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the coffee maker gurgled in the corner, and the normal sounds of Meridian Tech Solutions starting another busy day filtered through the thin walls. Everything was exactly as it had been 10 minutes earlier, except now I was living in a completely different reality. Let me be clear about something. I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't been careless. Hadn't left confidential documents lying around. Hadn't violated any company policy. I had received an official communication from HR, printed it in the secure printer that required my employee ID to release documents, and was reading it in the privacy of the break room during my own time. There was nothing inappropriate about my behavior. Nothing that justified what had just happened. The promotion itself was long overdue, not some surprise gift I hadn't earned. For 8 months, I had been performing every duty of the senior marketing director role while the company conducted a thorough search for the right candidate. I had led the Blackstone Industries campaign that brought in $2.3 million in new revenue. I had redesigned our client onboarding process, reducing churn by 37%. I had personally saved the Northpoint Healthcare account when their previous marketing director's strategy backfired spectacularly. During those 8 months, I had attended every senior leadership meeting, presented quarterly results to the board, and managed a team of 6 marketing professionals. I was doing the job, delivering the results, and carrying the responsibility. The only things I wasn't getting were the title, the salary, and the recognition. When the promotion letter finally arrived, it felt like validation of everything I'd quietly endured. All those times I'd watched colleagues take credit for my strategy. All those moments when I'd bitten my tongue instead of correcting the record. All those late nights perfecting presentations that someone else would deliver to applause. Finally, my work was being acknowledged by the people who mattered. The letter wasn't just about the money, though the 30% salary increase would certainly change my life. It was about being seen, It was about having my contributions officially recognized, instead of quietly absorbed into the company's success story, without my name attached. It was about sitting at tables where decisions were made, instead of being told about those decisions afterward. I had been so careful about this promotion process. When I applied for the position 8 months ago, I documented every project, every result, every client testimony. I submitted a portfolio that clearly demonstrated my strategic thinking and execution capabilities. I went through 3 rounds of interviews, including a presentation to the executive committee, where I outlined my vision for the department's future growth. The feedback had been overwhelmingly positive. "Isabella, your strategic approach is exactly what we need," the VP of Operations had told me after my final interview. "Your results speak for themselves." I had been patient when the decision took longer than expected. Professional when they asked me to continue covering the director responsibilities while they finalized the process. Understanding when they explained that they needed to ensure they were making the right choice for such an important role. I had played by every rule, exceeded every expectation, and demonstrated every qualification they claimed to value. This wasn't nepotism or office politics, or lucky timing. This was merit, pure and simple. The promotion letter in my hands had been the culmination of 3 years of proving myself and 8 months of doing the job without the recognition. And now it was gone, stuffed into Vivian's designer purse like it was some casual document she could claim as her own. The rational part of my mind was trying to process the logistics. I could explain to HR what happened. I could request another copy of the letter. I could report that confidential company documents had been taken by an unauthorized employee. But even as I thought through these options, I knew how they would sound. Vivian was family. Everyone at Meridian knew about our connection through Marcus. She was well-liked, charming, the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthdays and organized office celebrations. Who would believe that sunny, friendly Vivian had literally stolen a promotion letter from her sister-in-law? And even if they did believe it, what then? A he-said-she-said situation that would make me look petty and vindictive. The woman who couldn't even protect her own documents complaining about family drama, the uptight sister-in-law who was jealous of the newer, more charismatic employee. I could already hear how Vivian would spin it. "Oh, Isabella is being so dramatic. I was just looking at her letter because I was excited for her. She must have dropped it somewhere. You know how scattered she gets when she's stressed." With her innocent smile and concerned tone, she could make me sound paranoid and careless at the same time. But as I sat there in the empty break room, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about a stolen letter, this was about a pattern I'd been too polite to acknowledge. Vivian hadn't just taken my promotion letter, she had been systematically taking pieces of my professional identity for over a year. The question was, what was I going to do about it? For the first time in my career at Meridian Tech Solutions, I wasn't going to smile and let it slide. I wasn't going to be understanding about family dynamics. I wasn't going to protect someone who had just demonstrated that she saw me as an obstacle to remove, rather than a person to respect. I stood up from the break room table, walked to my desk and did something I'd never done before. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Every stolen idea, every redirected credit, every moment when Vivian had undermined my work while smiling to my face. Because if she wanted to play games with my career, she was about to learn that I had been playing by gentlemen's rules in a world that apparently didn't believe in them, and she had no idea what she had just started. I was still at my desk an hour later, methodically typing out a timeline of Vivian's behavior patterns, when I heard voices coming from the conference room next to my cubicle. The walls at Meridian were notoriously thin, a cost-saving measure that management claimed promoted transparency and collaboration, but really just meant everyone knew everyone else's business, whether they wanted to or not. Usually I tuned out the ambient office chatter, but this time, I heard my name. "Isabella's promotion is going to be a problem for me," Vivian's voice carried clearly through the wall. "I can't have her in a senior position when I'm trying to build my own reputation here." I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. She was talking to someone, but I couldn't identify the other voice. It was too muffled, too quiet. What I could hear crystal clear was every word that came out of Vivian's mouth. Look, I know she's been doing the work, but that doesn't mean she deserves the title, Vivian continued. She's too quiet, too behind the scenes. This company needs leadership that can be the face of the department, not someone who hides in spreadsheets all day. My chest tightened. I wanted to stand up to walk away, but something kept me frozen in place. A sick curiosity about what else she might reveal. The truth is, I've been setting this up for months, she said, and I could hear the smugness in her voice. Every time Isabella came up with a strategy, I made sure to present it to the board myself. Every client meeting she organized, I found a way to be the face of it. I've been positioning myself as the real driver of our department's success. There was a pause, then Vivian laughed, a sound I'd heard dozens of times at family dinners, but never with this edge of cruelty. She's so naive. She actually thinks hard work gets rewarded automatically. She has no idea how corporate politics actually work. While she's been perfecting her analytics, I've been building relationships with the people who make decisions. Marcus has been incredibly helpful with that, actually. His connections at the country club have opened so many doors. My brother-in-law, my own family connections were being used against me. The promotion letter thing this morning was perfect timing, Vivian continued. I mean, I wasn't planning to take it, but when I saw her sitting there so proud of herself, I realized this was my moment. She's going to report it lost or stolen, but who's going to believe her? I'm family, I'm likable, and I've already planted seeds with HR about her being stressed and overwhelmed lately. The other voice murmured something I couldn't catch, and Vivian responded immediately. Of course I'm going to apply for the position myself. I'll tell them I heard through the grapevine that it might be opening up again due to complications with the original candidate. I'll express concern about Isabella's ability to handle the pressure. Maybe mention that I've noticed her making small mistakes lately, seeming distracted. Nothing malicious, just worried family observations. I felt sick. She hadn't just stolen my letter impulsively. This was calculated, planned. She had been systematically undermining me for months, and this morning's theft was just the culmination of a strategy I'd been too trusting to see. The beautiful thing is, she'll never fight back, Vivian said, and this time I could hear the satisfaction clearly. Isabella is too polite, too worried about family harmony. She'll probably convince herself that I deserve the promotion more than she does. She's been doing that her whole life, stepping aside so other people can shine. It's pathetic really, but it makes this so much easier. The other voice said something longer this time, though I still couldn't make out the words. Vivian's response made my blood turn cold. Dave, oh, he has no idea what Isabella actually does at work. He thinks she's some mid-level administrative assistant who helps with marketing materials. She's too modest to tell him about her real contributions, and I've certainly never corrected that impression. Marcus thinks it's sweet how she downplays her role to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. As far as David knows, his wife just got passed over for a promotion she probably wasn't qualified for anyway. She had been managing my own family's perception of my career. While I thought I was being modest and professional by not bragging about my accomplishments at family gatherings, Vivian had been actively diminishing my achievements in their eyes. The best part is, even if she tries to tell David the truth now, it's going to sound like sour grapes, Vivian continued, like she's making up stories about her importance, because she's embarrassed about not getting promoted. I've laid the groundwork perfectly. Everyone thinks Isabella is sweet, but not particularly ambitious or capable of senior leadership. I realized I was holding my breath. 3 years of wondering why I felt invisible at family gatherings, why David never seemed to understand the scope of my work, why Marcus always seemed surprised when I mentioned complex projects. It wasn't because I was bad at explaining my job. It was because Vivian had been rewriting my professional story every chance she got. Isabella will probably quit within 6 months, Vivian said, and I could hear her moving around the conference room now, probably pacing as she talked. The stress of being passed over, combined with having to work under me when I get the promotion, she won't be able to handle it. She'll frame it as wanting to spend more time with family or pursue other opportunities, and honestly, that would be best for everyone. She doesn't have the personality for this level of corporate environment anyway. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She wasn't just trying to get ahead, she was actively planning to drive me out of my career entirely. This wasn't competition, it was sabotage with a smile. I know it sounds harsh, but some people just aren't built for leadership, Vivian continued. Isabella is great at following directions and implementing other people's ideas, but she doesn't have the vision or the presence to actually lead a department. I'm doing the company a favor by preventing a bad hiring decision. She was rewriting history in real time, turning my strategic thinking into order following, my quiet leadership style into lack of presence, my collaborative approach into inability to lead. Every strength I'd developed was being reframed as a weakness. Every success I'd achieved was being attributed to someone else's direction. The other voice spoke again, longer this time, and Vivian's tone shifted slightly. Yes, I know she's family and I'm not trying to hurt her personally. I actually like Isabella, she's a sweet person, but this is business and in business you have to be realistic about people's capabilities. She's reached her ceiling and it would be cruel to put her in a position where she's set up to fail. The condescension was almost worse than the cruel. She genuinely believed she was being kind by destroying my career. In her mind, she was saving me from responsibilities I couldn't handle, protecting me from failure by ensuring I never got the chance to succeed. I heard chairs moving, indicating the conversation was ending. Quickly, I minimized my documentation window and pulled up a random spreadsheet, trying to look busy as footsteps approached the conference room door. Thanks for listening, Vivian said to whoever she'd been talking to. It's nice to have someone who understands the complexities of office dynamics. Isabella is lucky to have people looking out for her best interests, even if she doesn't realize it. The door opened, and I caught a glimpse of Vivian walking out with James Morrison, the HR director. My stomach dropped. She hadn't just been venting to a friend, she'd been building her case with the person who would ultimately decide my professional fate. As they walked past my desk, Vivian caught my eye and smiled brightly. Isabella, how are you holding up after this morning? I hope you find your letter soon. These things have a way of turning up in the most unexpected places. The innocent concern in her voice, knowing what I'd just heard, was almost surreal. She was playing her role perfectly, the caring sister-in-law worried about my carelessness with important documents. I'm sure it will, I managed to say, matching her smile with one of my own. As she walked away chatting casually with James about weekend plans, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was wrong. My marriage, my family relationships, my career prospects, all of it had been shaped by someone who saw me as an obstacle to remove, rather than a person to respect. But what Vivian didn't know, what she had never bothered to discover in all her careful planning, was that quiet doesn't mean powerless. And she had just made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated exactly who she was messing with. I sat at my desk for exactly 15 minutes after Vivian's conversation with James Morrison, staring at my computer screen but seeing nothing. My mind was racing through 3 years of interactions, re-examining every family dinner, every work meeting, every moment when I'd felt slightly off balance, but couldn't pinpoint why. Now I knew. I hadn't been paranoid or oversensitive. I'd been systematically gaslit by someone who smiled while she dismantled my professional life, piece by piece. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else took its place. A strange calm that I'd never felt before. For the first time in months, maybe years, I could see the situation clearly. All the doubt, all the second guessing, all the wondering if I was imagining slights or being too sensitive, it was gone. Vivian had just handed me the gift of absolute clarity about who she really was and what she was really doing. I opened a new document on my computer and began typing. Not the emotional timeline I'd started earlier, but something else entirely, a resignation letter. Not because I was giving up, because I was taking control. Dear Mr. Harrison, I wrote, addressing Meridian's CEO. Please accept this letter as my formal resignation from my position as marketing specialist, effective immediate. I am returning all company property and will ensure a smooth transition of my current projects. Simple, professional, immediate. I didn't mention Vivian. I didn't mention the stolen promotion letter. I didn't mention the months of systematic undermining, or the conversation I just overheard. I simply resigned from a position that was no longer serving my interests. Because here's what Vivian had miscalculated in all her careful planning. She assumed I needed Meridian Tech Solutions more than Meridian Tech Solutions needed me. She assumed I would fight for scraps from a table where I wasn't welcome rather than build my own table elsewhere. She assumed that quiet meant weak, that professional meant pushover, that polite meant powerless. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I printed the resignation letter on official letterhead, signed it, and walked directly to CEO Michael Harrison's office. His assistant Jennifer looked surprised to see me. "Isabella, do you have an appointment with Mr. Harris?" "No, but I have something that requires his immediate attention," I said, handing her the letter. "Could you please ensure he receives this within the hour? It's time sensitive." Jennifer glanced at the envelope, saw a resignation written clearly across the front, and her eyebrows shot up. "Isabella, is everything all right? Maybe we should schedule a meeting to discuss whatever's concerning you." "Thank you, Jennifer, but the letter explains everything Mr. Harrison needs to know," I said. "I'll be cleaning out my desk if he needs to reach me before end of business today." I walked back to my cubicle with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. No dramatic announcements, no emotional outbursts, no explanations to curious colleagues. I simply began packing my personal items into the cardboard box I'd retrieved from the supply closet. My framed photo with David from our honeymoon in Santorini, the small succulent plant I'd been nursing for 2 years, the coffee mug my team had given me last Christmas with "World's Best Problem Solver" printed in cheerful letter. 3 years of accumulated personal touches that had made this corporate cube feel like home. As I worked, I could feel eyes on me from around the office. Colleagues were starting to notice that Isabella Chen, the reliable one who never caused drama, was quietly packing up her desk at 11:30 on a Tuesday morning. The whispers started almost immediately. "Isabella leaving? Did she get fired? I thought she was getting promoted." Perfect. Let them wonder. Let the questions percolate through the office. Let management start to panic when they realized that the person who actually knew how all their systems worked was walking out the door. Vivian appeared at my cubicle about 20 minutes into my packing process. Her face was a masterpiece of concerned confusion. "Isabella, what are you doing? Why are you packing?" I looked up at her with the same bright smile she'd given me earlier. "I'm resigning, Vivian. Effective immediately. Resigning." Her voice pitched higher. "But why? What happened? Is this about the letter from this morning? Because I'm sure we can figure out what happened to it." "This isn't about the letter," I said, which was technically true. This was about so much more than the letter. I've simply decided that Meridian isn't the right fit for my career goals anymore. I watched her process this information, watched her try to figure out how my resignation fit into her carefully constructed plans. She'd been preparing to sabotage my promotion and drive me out slowly over 6 months. She hadn't planned for me to simply leave on my own terms before she could execute the rest of her strategy. "But Isabella, you can't just quit without notice. What about your projects? What about the Blackstone campaign? The North Point account? You're in the middle of critical work. I'll be providing detailed transition notes for whoever takes over my responsibilities," I said, continuing to pack. "I'm sure the company will manage just fine." This was the part I'd been looking forward to. Vivian had spent months positioning herself as the real driver of our department's success. Now she was about to discover what happened when the person doing the actual work simply stopped doing it. "Isabella, this is crazy," she said, and for the first time I heard genuine panic in her voice. "You can't just leave. We're family. Whatever's bothering you, we can work it out. Maybe you're just stressed about the promotion process." "I'm not stressed," I said calmly. "I'm making a strategic career decision. Surely you can understand that." I used her own language back at her. Strategic, career-focused, unemotional. The professional vocabulary she'd been using to justify destroying my reputation. By noon, word had reached the executive level. Jennifer called my desk phone to ask if I could reconsider the immediate resignation, if I might be willing to work out a 2-week notice period. I politely declined. Michael Harrison himself walked down to my cubicle at 12:30, looking genuinely concerned. "Isabella, Jennifer gave me your letter. This is quite unexpected. Is there something we can address? Some issue we can resolve?" I stood up from my nearly empty desk and faced the CEO of Meridian Tech Solutions. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate your concern, but my decision is final. I've enjoyed my time here, but I'm ready for new challenges. But the Blackstone project, the North Point account, you're the lead on our most critical campaigns. We can't afford to lose your institutional knowledge. There it was, the admission that Vivian had been trying to make everyone forget. I was the lead. I was the one with the institutional knowledge. I was the person they couldn't afford to lose. I'm confident the team will adapt. Change creates opportunities for others to step up and demonstrate their capabilities. I glanced at Vivian, who was hovering near the conversation, her face pale. She was beginning to understand that her plan to slowly edge me out had just accelerated beyond her control, but not in the direction she'd intended. Isabella, please, Michael continued. At least give us 2 weeks to transition your responsibility. We'll match any competing offer you've received. We'll expedite your promotion approval, whatever it takes to keep you here. The promotion that had been stolen from me that morning was now being offered as a desperate retention tool. It would have been satisfying if I'd still wanted it. But I'd moved beyond wanting validation from people who had allowed me to be systematically undermined. Thank you, but no, I said simply. My last day is today. I picked up my cardboard box and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, I could hear Michael asking Vivian urgent questions about project statuses and client relationships. I could hear her stammering responses, suddenly realizing that she'd been taking credit for work she didn't actually understand how to execute. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Vivian through the gap, standing in the middle of the office with everyone looking at her expectantly. The woman who had been positioning herself as the department's real leader was about to discover what it felt like to actually lead without someone else doing the work behind the scenes. I walked out of Meridian Tech Solutions for the last time, leaving behind 3 years of quiet excellence, and taking with me something far more valuable: the absolute certainty that I deserved better than begging for recognition from people who had never intended to give. What I didn't realize yet was that this was just the beginning of showing Vivian exactly what she had underestimated about the quiet one. I drove home from Meridian in complete silence, my cardboard box of personal items sitting in the passenger seat like evidence of a life I was leaving behind. But as I pulled into our driveway in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willowbrook Heights, I wasn't thinking about what I'd just walked away from. I was thinking about how I'd gotten to that point in the first place. The truth was, my resignation that morning wasn't really about Vivian stealing my promotion letter. It was about finally recognizing a pattern that had been playing out for far longer than just my time at Meridian Tech Solutions. I had been invisible my entire life, and I had been complicit in my own erasure. It started in college at Northwestern University, where I met David during our junior year. Even then, I was the behind-the-scenes person. I was the one who organized study groups but never spoke up during discussions. I was the one who edited everyone else's papers but never shared my own insights in class. I was the one who planned the social events but stood in the background while others took credit for successful parties. David noticed me precisely because I wasn't trying to be noticed. "You're the reason everything works so smoothly," he told me after a study group session where I'd quietly coordinated schedules, reserved rooms, and prepared materials for 12 people, "but you never take credit for any of it." I thought that was romantic at the time, the idea that someone finally saw my contributions, finally recognized my value. What I didn't realize was that I was setting a precedent for invisibility that would follow me for the next 8 years. When David and I got married 2 years after graduation, I naturally became the family coordinator. I planned every holiday gathering, remembered every birthday, managed every social obligation. When his brother Marcus started dating Vivian during her senior year at DePaul University, I was the one who welcomed her into the family, helped her navigate David's parents' expectations, and made sure she felt included in every tradition. I was proud of being the bridge builder, the harmony keeper, the person who made everything flow smoothly for everyone else. I thought that was my strength. I thought that was my contribution to the family dynamic. What I see now is that I was training everyone, including myself, to expect my effort without acknowledging my impact. The pattern became clear when I started working at Meridian 3 years ago. I was hired as a marketing associate, the same level Vivian would eventually be hired at, but I approached the job the way I approached everything else in my life. I focused on doing excellent work and assumed that excellence would speak for itself. During my first year, I single-handedly saved the Aurora manufacturing account when their previous marketing strategy failed spectacularly. I spent 3 weeks analyzing their customer data, identified a completely different target demographic, and developed a campaign that increased their sales by 48% within 6 months. But when the case study was presented to the board, my supervisor at the time, Derek Mitchell, presented it as a team effort with himself as the strategic lead. I didn't speak up. I told myself that being part of a successful team was more important than individual recognition. I told myself that good work would eventually be noticed and rewarded appropriately. The same thing happened with the Clearwater Technologies project. I developed an integrated social media strategy that became the template for all our tech clients going forward. My campaign increased their engagement by 300% and generated over $1 million in new business within 8 months. But at the annual company meeting, the campaign was presented as a department initiative, with no individual attribution. Again, I stayed silent. I told myself that I was being professional, that I was putting the company's success above my own ego. I told myself that mature employees didn't need constant recognition to do good work. This pattern continued for 2 years before Vivian even arrived at Meridian. I was already primed to be invisible. I had already established myself as someone who would do exceptional work without demanding credit, who would solve problems without seeking recognition, who would carry more than my share of responsibility without asking for proportional reward. When Vivian joined the company 14 months ago, she didn't create my invisibility, she simply exploited it. I remember her first week at Meridian. I was assigned to help with her onboarding, to show her our systems and introduce her to our client. She was charming, enthusiastic, and genuinely seemed to appreciate my guidance. "Isabella, you're so knowledgeable about everything," she said after I'd walked her through our client management system. "I hope we can work together on some projects. I have so much to learn from you." I was flattered. It felt good to be seen as the expert, to have my experience valued. What I didn't recognize was that she was conducting reconnaissance, not expressing admiration. Within her first month, Vivian had identified exactly how our department functioned. I did the analytical work, developed the strategies, and managed the client relationships, while others presented the results and took credit for the successes. She didn't need to change the system. She just needed to position herself as one of the people taking credit instead of one of the people doing the work. But Vivian was smarter than my previous colleagues. She didn't just steal credit, she actively worked to diminish my visibility while elevating her own. When I developed the strategy for the Pinnacle Industries campaign, she volunteered to help with implementation, but what she actually did was insert herself into every client meeting, every status update, every presentation to leadership. Gradually, Pinnacle Industries began thinking of Vivian as their primary contact. When they sent thank you notes, they addressed them to her. When they referred new clients, they mentioned her by name. When leadership discussed the success of the campaign, they associated it with Vivian's excellent client relationship management. I thought this was just an unfortunate side effect of collaborative work. I told myself that client satisfaction was more important than personal recognition. I told myself that Vivian's enthusiasm was an asset to the team. What I failed to see was that this wasn't collaboration, it was systematic credit theft, executed with precision and planning. The same thing happened with every major project over the next year. I would do the research, develop the strategy, and create the implementation plan. Vivian would volunteer to support the project, then gradually position herself as the face of its success. Meanwhile, I remained in the background, proud of my work but increasingly invisible to the people who made decisions about promotions and recognition. Even worse, Vivian began subtly undermining my contributions in meetings. When I presented analysis, she would ask questions that implied I might have missed important factors. When I proposed strategies, she would suggest refinements that were actually fundamental changes designed to create confusion about whose ideas we were implementing. When I managed client relationships, she would express concern about whether they were getting enough senior attention. She never directly criticized me, she never openly disputed my competence. Instead, she created doubt about my judgment, confusion about my contributions, and concern about my leadership capabilities. She made me look unreliable while positioning herself as the voice of reason and reliability. And because I had spent my entire life training people to overlook my contributions, I didn't recognize what was happening until it was too late. I didn't speak up when she redirected credit because I'd never spoken up before. I didn't demand recognition for my work because I'd never demanded recognition before. I didn't insist on visibility because I'd never learned to value my own visibility. By the time Vivian stole my promotion letter that morning, She wasn't just stealing a piece of paper, she was taking the culmination of a systematic campaign to erase me from my own professional story, and she was able to do it because I had spent 3 years, hell, I had spent my entire life teaching people that Isabella Chen's contributions were valuable, but Isabella Chen herself was disposable. But as I sat in my car in our driveway, holding the keys to a house I shared with a husband who didn't even know what I actually did for a living, I realized something important. Just because I had been complicit in my own invisibility didn't mean I had to stay invisible forever. For the first time in my life, I was about to find out what happened when the quiet one decided to speak up. David got home at 6:30 that evening, the same time he always did. I heard his Tesla pull into the garage, heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard him drop his laptop bag by the front door. Our evening routine had been the same for 3 years. He'd ask about my day while loosening his tie. I'd give him a brief summary while starting dinner, and we'd spend the evening in comfortable parallel activity, him reviewing investment portfolios, me catching up on industry reports. Except tonight I was sitting on our living room couch with my cardboard box beside me, still wearing the business casual outfit I'd put on that morning for what I thought would be a celebration of my promotion. "Bella," David called using the nickname he'd given me in college. "You're home early, everything okay?" I watched him walk into the living room, saw his eyes take in the cardboard box, the way I was sitting perfectly still instead of bustling around the kitchen. For a moment his face showed the mild confusion of someone whose routine had been unexpectedly disrupted. "I quit my job today," I said simply. David stopped moving entirely. "You what?" "I resigned from Meridian, effective immediately." For 10 seconds, he just stared at me. Then he sat down heavily in the armchair across from me, the same spot where he'd proposed 2 years earlier. "Bella, what happened? Did someone say something to you? Was there some kind of incident?" This was the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading during my drive home. "How do you explain to your husband that your sister-in-law has been systematically destroying your career while he remained completely oblivious? How do you tell someone that the person they trust and welcome into family gatherings has been gaslighting you for over a year? More importantly, how do you explain that their own perception of your professional life has been so thoroughly manipulated that they don't even know what you actually do for a living?" He looked genuinely confused by the question. "You're in marketing, right? You help with campaigns and materials, administrative stuff, project coordination." Why? There it was. My husband of 5 years, my partner who shared a mortgage and a life with me, thought I was essentially a marketing assistant. Not because he was dismissive or inattentive, but because someone had been carefully shaping his understanding of my professional identity for over a year. "I'm the lead strategist for Meridian's largest accounts," I said quietly. "I develop comprehensive marketing campaigns that generate millions of dollars in revenue. I manage relationships with Fortune 5. I've been essentially performing the duties of a senior marketing director for 8 months. David's eyebrows furrowed, but Vivian said, "I mean, at Marcus's birthday dinner last month, she mentioned that you were really good at supporting the senior team with research and implementation." Supporting the senior team, research and implementation. The careful language Vivian had used to diminish my role while technically not lying about my responsibilities. "David, this morning I received a promotion letter making me the official senior marketing director." Vivian took it from me in the break room and told me I didn't deserve it more than she did. The confusion on his face deepened, but now it was mixed with something else, a dawning realization that something fundamental about his understanding of our life was wrong. "She took your promotion letter. Why would she do that?" "Because she's been positioning herself to take my job for over a year. She's been systematically taking credit for my work, undermining my reputation with management, and apparently managing our family's perception of my career to ensure no one would believe me if I tried to expose what she was doing." I watched David process this information. I could see him mentally reviewing conversations, family gatherings, casual comments that he'd never questioned before. "But she's family," he said finally. "She wouldn't. Vivian likes you. She's always talking about how much she enjoys working with you." "She enjoys taking credit for working with me," I corrected. "There's a difference." Before David could respond, his phone buzzed, then again, then a third time in rapid succession. He glanced at the screen, and his expression changed. "It's Marcus," he said. "He's calling." We both knew why Marcus would be calling on a Tuesday evening. News traveled fast in corporate environments, and Meridian Tech Solutions was probably in full crisis mode by now. David answered the call, putting it on speaker without asking if I minded. I appreciated that small gesture of solidarity. Marcus, what's going on? David, thank God you answered. Is Isabella there? We need to talk about what happened today. Marcus's voice had an edge I'd never heard before, not angry. Exactly, but strained in a way that suggested he'd been dealing with fallout for hours. I'm here, Marcus, I said. Isabella, Vivian is beside herself. She said you just walked out of work without any explanation, left everyone hanging on major projects. Michael Harrison has been calling me all afternoon asking what's going on with our family. Our family, as if this was some personal drama that reflected poorly on the Chen family name, rather than a professional issue that belonged entirely to Meridian Tech Solutions. I submitted a formal resignation letter to the CEO, I said calmly. There was nothing unprofessional about my departure. But why? Marcus's voice pitched higher. Vivian said there was some misunderstanding about a promotion letter, but surely that could have been worked out. She's worried sick that she somehow offended you. David was watching my face as I listened to his brother defend the woman who had been systematically sabotaging my career. I could see him starting to understand that this wasn't just about one stolen letter. Marcus, did Vivian tell you what was in that promotion letter? I asked. She said it was some kind of administrative update about your role. Look, Isabella, I know office politics can get complicated, but walking out without notice is going to hurt your reputation in this industry. People talk administrative update. Vivian had even managed Marcus's understanding of what she'd stolen from me. The letter was offering me the position of senior marketing director, I said. The position I've been performing for 8 months without official recognition. Vivian took it from my hands and told me I didn't deserve it. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus spoke again, but his tone had shifted. That doesn't sound like something Vivian would do. Are you sure there wasn't some kind of misunderstanding? I'm sure, I said. Just like I'm sure she's been taking credit for my work for over a year. Just like I'm sure she's been managing your perception of my professional capabilities to ensure you'd react exactly the way you're reacting right now. Isabella, that's a serious accusation, Marcus said. But now he sounded less certain. Vivian has always spoken very highly of your contributions. Has she spoken about my contributions in a way that makes them sound less significant than they actually are? I could hear Marcus thinking, probably reviewing months of conversations with his wife about her work life and mine. Look, he said finally, maybe everyone just needs to take a step back. Vivian is willing to help smooth things over with management, if you want to go back. She feels terrible about whatever happened. She feels terrible. Not she apologizes for stealing my promotion letter. Not she admits she was wrong. She feels terrible about whatever happened, as if this was some mysterious misunderstanding rather than deliberate sabotage. Marcus, I'm not going back to Meridian, I said. And I need you to understand that this isn't a family issue. This is a professional issue between me and someone who happens to be married to your brother. But Isabella, the conversation is over, David interrupted. And I looked at him in surprise. His voice was firm in a way I rarely heard. Isabella is my wife, and if she says someone has been sabotaging her career, I believe. Whatever Vivian's motivations were, the result is that my wife felt she had to quit her job to protect herself. The line went quiet. Marcus was probably processing the fact that David was taking my side without hearing Vivian's version of events first. We'll talk about this later, Marcus said finally. When everyone has had time to cool down. After he hung up, David and I sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I should have been paying more attention to what you were actually accomplishing at work. I should have questioned why our understanding of your job seemed so different from the hours you were putting in and the stress you were bringing home. It was the first real acknowledgement I'd received all day that my experience was valid, that my professional identity mattered, that someone cared enough to pay attention to the details. David, I said, there's something else you should know about Meridian Tech Solutions. He looked at me expectantly. Your investment firm owns a controlling stake in the company. The expression on his face told me that Vivian had made one crucial error in all her careful planning. She had never bothered to find out exactly who she was messing with. David stared at me for a full 30 seconds after I told him about Quantum Ventures' controlling stake in Meridian Tech Solutions. I watched his expression shift from confusion to recognition to something I'd never seen before. A cold, calculated anger that transformed his usually gentle features into something almost predatory. "Say that again," he said quietly. "Quantum Ventures owns 58% of Meridian Tech Solutions." I repeated. "You acquired the controlling stake 18 months ago, when they needed capital for their expansion into the Pacific Northwest market. It was part of your Q3 2023 portfolio restructure." David was already reaching for his laptop, pulling up files with the kind of focused intensity he usually reserved for major investment decisions. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he accessed Quantum's portfolio management system. "Jesus," he breathed, staring at the screen. "Meridian Tech Solutions, annual revenue $47 million, 312 employees, current valuation $89 million. He looked up at me. "Bella, why didn't you ever tell me you worked for one of our portfolio companies?" This was the question I'd been dreading, because the answer revealed just how completely I'd been conditioned to minimize my own importance. "Because I didn't think it mattered," I said. "I thought mentioning it would look like I was trying to use your influence to advance my career. I wanted my success to be based on my own merit, not on who I was married to." David's expression softened slightly. "Your success is based on your own merit. But Bella, do you realize what this means? I've been receiving quarterly reports about Meridian's performance for over a year. Their marketing department has been their strongest division. Their client retention rates, their revenue growth, their campaign success metrics, they've been consistently exceeding projections." He pulled up another file, scanning through financial data and performance reports. "Look at this," he said, turning the laptop screen toward me. "Q4 2023, marketing department exceeded revenue targets by 34%. Q1 2024, client retention in marketing services increased to 96%. Q2 2024, 3 major client acquisitions attributed to innovative campaign strategies." He paused. "Bella, these reports have been landing on my desk every quarter. I've been impressed by Meridian's marketing performance for over a year." I felt something twist in my stomach. "Those Q1 2024, client retention in marketing services increased to 96%. Q2 2024, 3 major client acquisitions attributed to innovative campaign strategies." He paused. "Desk every quarter. I've been marketing performance for over a year." Twist in my stomach. "Those 24, client retention in marketing services increased to 96%. Q2 2024, 3 major client acquisitions attributed to innovative campaign strategies." He paused. "Desk every quarter. I've been marketing performance for over a year." Twist in my stomach. "Those 24, client retention in marketing services increased to 96%. Q2 2024, 3 major client acquisitions attributed to innovative campaign strategies." Marketing performance for over a year. Twist in my stomach. "Those 24, client retention in marketing services increased to 96%. Q2 2024, 3 major client acquisitions attributed to marketing performance for over a year." Twist in my stomach. "Those 24, client retention in marketing services increased to 96%. Q2 2024, 3 major client twist in my stomach. Those 24. Client retention in marketing services increased to 96%. Q2 2024. Twist in my stomach. Those increased to 96%. Q2 2024. Q2